What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well, and thanks so much as usual for taking the time out of your day to click here on another video, where today we're going to be talking about a film I got to check out quite a bit early ahead of its release here in the States on October 29th, and that film is called Stitchhead. Written and directed by Steve Hudson, this film stars people like Asa Butterfield, Joel Fry, Tia Bannon, Rob Brydon, and more. And before we get too far into this, I want to say a big thanks to those kind folks over at Briarcliff Entertainment for sending me over an early screener for this one. Full transparency, I hadn't heard of Stitchhead until about a few weeks back when I was at my local theater and I started to see a couple of posters and a cardboard cutout for the film, where I thought to myself, this looks like a cute fun time. I'm always a sucker for a Frankenstein adjacent kind of animated Halloween film for the family that you can go and check out in theaters. And then when I checked my inbox in my email not too long after, I saw that there was a ability to request an early screener, which made me pretty excited to check it out. So without further ado, let's get into what this film is all about, and then we'll get into my thoughts on the film. The film opens up at Castle Grotesque, high above the town of Grubber's Nobbin. Stitchhead, a patchwork creature forgotten by the mad professor who brought him to life, quietly maintains the castle and hides other experimental creatures from fearful townsfolk. When a freak show arrives in town, its owner, Fulbert Freakfinder, sees potential in Stitchhead and proposes a life beyond the shadows, forcing Stitchhead to choose between loyalty and desire for belonging. And I'm happy to start this off by saying that I had a good time with Stitchhead. I want to be clear though, I didn't think Stitchhead was incredible, but I do think this is a cute, fun time. I think this is the kind of film that your kids will enjoy, and if you're looking for something new in the Halloween season to take your kids to go and check out, that's light, it's fluffy, it's sweet, it's cute, it's got that little spooky element to it, but it's not really scary in any way, shape, or form, and it's pretty tame when it comes down to anything that could be too crude, then I think Stitchhead is going to be the kind of film for a lot of parents to take their kids to. With that said, I still think that there's a lot here to enjoy for people who are just a fan of animation film or a fan of just Halloween related things in general. But I do want to make it clear that if you're an adult and you're going into Stitchhead expecting the same kind of quality of writing that you would see from bigger studios in the modern day like Disney or Pixar or DreamWorks, I don't necessarily know that you're going to get that here with Stitchhead. This isn't a film that I think has the deepest and richest narrative, but it is a film that has some very touching elements to it and a very charming tone to the overall picture. The idea of this film in a lot of ways feels very similar to a lot of things. It feels like a mixed bag of things like Frankenstein, Pinocchio, oftentimes Dumbo, and even a Beauty and the Beast kind of element to it. There's a lot about this film that feels reminiscent of things you've seen before, which at times does make it predictable, but does make it at least a fun, familiar ride that just asks you to sit there and enjoy some of the silly humor and some of the silly moments between our characters. And animation-wise, a lot about this film actually reminded me of animated films that would have come out in the 2000s or in the early 2010s. While it does definitely have a little bit more polish than the films that you would see from that era, especially when it comes down to details like hair textures and different things like that. Again, I wouldn't say that it's on the same level of animation quality that you see coming from the bigger studios like a DreamWorks Animation or something like Disney and Pixar, but I do really enjoy the animation style here, and more than anything, I like the stylized, character designs, especially around the monsters we see in this film, because Stitchhead is our main character, played by Asa Butterfield, but there is a slew of other experimental creatures, as I've already mentioned, that are in this film, and I enjoyed the designs around majority of these characters, with the main ones we focus on definitely being Stitchhead, of course, since he is the title character, and his bestest friend, Creature, who's pretty much created right at the very beginning of the film, and they create a very close bond very, very quickly shortly after. The two of them are very charming. They're played by Asa Butterfield and Joel Fry, and I thought that they were a lot of fun over the course of the film. And I think one thing that people will pick up from the tone of this film immediately, or the style of this film immediately, is kind of a Tim Burton-esque kind of vibe. By no means is this in the same kind of creepy, dark element that you would see in something like A Nightmare Before Christmas or Corpse Bride, but I do feel like the film at times feels inspired by things Tim Burton has done in the past, which definitely kind of heightened the experience for me as a big fan of Tim Burton. Now, when it comes down to the film's story, like I already mentioned, it's reminiscent of a few stories, but the main one I think in a lot of ways would probably be Pinocchio and Dumbo, and specifically the notion of having a character who doesn't really feel loved. And in a lot of ways, this is a story about recognizing that that love has been around you, and maybe you were looking in the wrong places for that love, maybe seeking love in an area where there was not necessarily love, only to realize that the love that you were seeking was there all along. And I think that's something that we can all relate to, right? I think there's a lot of times where we're kind of blind to the the admiration that we have of the people in our lives, and we seek out that outside validation. And so in the case of Stitchhead, he doesn't really feel beloved by the mad scientist that created him, and that's a big central piece to his whole driving factor in this film. So when this circus comes into town and they're like, hey man, you could be like a big staple at our circus, please come and you can be like part of this freak show and everybody will love you. He sold the idea of like fame behind a freak show, which is something we've seen before. Again, Pinocchio, Dumbo, there are literally scenes in this film that just feel reminiscent 100% of both of those films. So yeah, there's definitely familiarity here, but I do think that at the end of it, you have a charming story with a good message. I think the idea of seeking out love and recognizing that a lot of times that love is present in your life already, or sometimes the idea of somebody recognizing that they aren't giving you the love that they should and maybe having to realize, hey, you know, I think I need to step up a little bit more. I think that's stuff that you can find in Stitchhead that I think is going to be a good message for families, specifically kids. And in a lot of ways, when it comes down to the humor and any of the dark element of this film, there's not really a lot of crude humor. There's not a lot of adult humor, which may turn off some adults. But again, I think it creates a safe family environment for people who are just coming to take their kids to see this movie. Though there is one scene in particular with characters throwing their undergarments that is a comedic scene in the film, but is probably the most crude that they get in the film. And with that mixed bag of positives and negatives out of the way, I think my biggest gripes with this film would be just an underexplored world and underdeveloped characters. In a lot of ways, like I already mentioned, it's familiar to things you've seen before. I don't think Stitchhead is breaking new ground in any way, shape, or form. However, it is a film that leaves a lot on the table to play with, and I think that was my biggest gripe with it for sure. Creature being a huge part of the film. I already mentioned that him and Stitchhead are the bestest friends in the film, and most of that comes from the character of Creature, who immediately latches on to the character of Stitchhead. And I just wish that they kind of explored their friendship a lot more, because I think the two characters are charming. I think the time spent between the two characters is funny, is charming. The setup of Creature coming into this world kind of sets up what's going on at this castle. They do a good job of giving you that expository dialogue through the character of Creature, and I just found the two of them to be really enjoyable. But at times it felt like one of those movies where the two characters have a deeper bond than the film has actually done the work to make you feel like they have that bond. It's something that I think kids will latch onto pretty quickly, but it left me, as somebody who wants to see characters develop together, feeling like there was just something missing there. And as I mentioned before, you have a bunch of other creatures in this film, and I would argue that most of them just have like little moments of dialogue or little silly beats, but the film never explores at least more outside of Stitchhead and Creature. There's a slew of other characters that have their moments of comedic moments, or just moments of just kind of like random lines of dialogue, but they never really dug deeper into these characters. And so it's the kind of movie that by the time you get to the end, between the monsters and the human characters, you never really feel like you get anything beyond the surface level of these characters, which was a bummer. And then a big central point of the whole film is Stitchhead running away because he feels like the mad scientist who created him is just always on to the next creature and doesn't give love to him and the other creatures. He doesn't feel appreciated. And the mad scientist in general feels like a character that's just kind of there to push the story forward and kind of there to be kind of, you know, put a bow on top of things by the time you get to the end of the film, but less so because he's actually a character they had any sort of writing with in the film, any sort of ideas to expand upon him. And there's a huge chunk of this film where you have Stitchhead going off to be a part of the circus, where the mad scientist isn't part of the film in any way, shape, or form. And I thought that was a really great time for the writers and for the story to take the character of the mad professor and try to expand upon him a little bit more. Does he miss Stitchhead? Does he even recognize that Stitchhead is gone? Those are things that are just flat out not explored in the film, and ultimately for me held the story back from being anything other than a surface level, cute enough, charming family film that, you know, is not really going to be something that's overly memorable come 4, 5, 6 years down the line. All in all, I think Stitchhead is a good time for families. I think kids will enjoy it. I enjoyed watching it. I wasn't bored while watching it, but I think its predictability and its lack of its overall character development do hold it back from being anything other than a run-of-the-mill family animated film for this Halloween season that a lot of people will likely not think about next Halloween. I can't imagine this becoming a staple in people's households, but maybe there will be kids that latch onto this. Who knows? Maybe one one day down the line, a sequel will be greenlit with a bigger budget. We can get Stitch Head 2. But for now, all I can say is I enjoyed Stitch Head. I think a lot of parents will have a good time taking their kids to watch something safe, but I don't necessarily know that this film is going to shake ground for the studio, and I don't necessarily know that this story is going to grip all of the world right now in this Halloween season. And a lot of times when it comes down to these animated pictures, I try to keep in mind the competition of other films coming out around this time or this year in the world of animation. And while I think Stitch Head is a solid enough film, enjoyable, I just don't necessarily know that it rises to the top of the best animated films that I've seen in 2025. So that's going to be my thoughts on Stitch Head. I know I'm seeing this quite a bit early, but if you got the chance to check it out yourself, what did you think about it? And if you're watching this review way down the line once the movie does officially come out, let me know what you thought about the film. Are you planning on checking it out? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.